Hello, sixth grade Bobcats. Mr. Flato here. Welcome back to another great week at the Helena Middle School. On this week's B.O.B Lesson, we're going to continue kind of going down that path of careers. I know Miss Glukert and Miss Campbell did some career stuff with you guys. It's been a little bit, about a month, 2 months, somewhere in there. To finish the year, we're going to kind of review some of the career interests and the interest types and start to wrap our brain around which interest type do we think we are. As human beings, we're all a little bit different. What we find interesting or what we find satisfaction and joy in could be very different than the person sitting next to us or sitting behind us, and that's okay. A lot of life is getting to know who you are, especially with careers, figuring out who you are, what you value. That's more 7th and 8th grade stuff. And then what our capacities are to find the right career for us someday. I know that we're several years away from getting out into the workplace and working full-time, but it's never too early to start thinking about this stuff as we go along here. So, going to introduce that today, get rock and rolling on this today. Hope you guys go out and have a great week. All right, as promised, this week's B.O.B lesson is going to be titled Career Interest Types, and we're going to dive into realistic careers today. But first, let's be our best this week at HMS. Let's be B.O.B. Let's be safe, let's be responsible, let's be respectful, and let's be a learner. All right, so now I'm going to introduce something called Holland Codes, and this was invented by an American psychologist named John Holland in the middle of the 19th century, the 20th century, and he basically said that we as human beings have different personalities, and we know this to be true from other B.O.B lessons that I have talked. We all have our own different personalities, but he basically came up with a theory that you could take somebody's personality, and depending on what their personality is, you could break them into a different interest type, and their research showed that their personalities that they have are going to flourish in certain career environments or certain jobs or careers, and human beings are going to have more fun, they're going to have more accountability, and they're going to have higher levels of enjoyment in certain interest type areas, and I really believe this is true. So he broke this into 6 different interest types. If you look at the top left, you have conventional, and I'm going to break these down here for the rest of the school year and talk more about careers and break these interest types down. You have conventional, you have realistic, which I'm going to talk more about today. You have investigative, you have artistic, you have social, and you have enterprising. And we can do some assessments, and we may get to that here in the future, careers and taking interest types, and I know you guys have taken some stuff on career cruising already, but they can essentially ask you about different types of jobs and your enjoyment, and would you be interested in that, and would you think that is fun, and they can break it down. My interest type is social, enterprising, and conventional. Social being number 1, the orange one, enterprising being number 2, the blue one, and conventional being number 3, the gray one. And you'll notice that when it comes to this hexagon, a lot of times your top 3 are going to be on the same side, or they're going to be closely aligned, because all of these interest types do align closely with one another. For instance, I'm a social interest type, and the last kind of careers I would want to do would be realistic, and you can see that's across the hexagon. If you were a conventional interest type, you would have the opposite personality of somebody that is an artistic interest type. And same with enterprising. If you're an enterprising type in the blue, that's going to be way different than being an investigative type, and so on and so forth. So we have these 6 different interest types, and my goal for you guys in these last few B.O.B lessons to close out the year is to really sit and think, would I enjoy that? Not how much money would I make, not the kind of social status these jobs have, but would I enjoy doing these types of jobs? Do they fit my interests? Do they fit my skill types? So the first one we're going to look at today is called realistic. And realistic career characteristics emphasize using your body and muscle to build or produce things. So you're going to be using your hands and your body more than you're going to be using your mind to problem solve in the realistic realm. These are doers. These are people who are practical and thrifty. These are people that are mechanically oriented. This is why my roommate is very mechanically oriented. My neighbor across the street that lives between me and Mr. Kepler, shout out to Mr. Kepler and his advisor, is very mechanical. So whenever I have something go wrong with my lawnmower or my car, he's always the one that I go to. Again, I'm very the opposite of the realistic type. Realistic types work in all different kinds of environments. They work inside, they work outside, they work in warm weather outside, they work in cold weather outside, they work in all different types of environments. Another characteristic of realistic type is they use tools and they operate machinery. That neighbor that I mentioned, he's got like the ultimate man cave. He's got every tool, every gadget imaginable, and I, again, I'm the opposite. I barely have a toolbox with a screwdriver, and so I go over there and borrow his stuff. He's a good neighbor and a good friend, but a lot of these realistic careers, you have to use your tools and you operate machinery to build and assemble things. Some of these careers involve being outside and interacting with animals, maybe being out in the woods, maybe being a park ranger or a rancher, and I'm going to get to some careers here in a minute. These careers are often more male-dominated industry, but that does not mean that the ladies out there cannot do these careers as well. But in the realistic career, inventory types, you definitely see more males in those types of industries or doing those types of careers. A lot of the realistic careers require medium levels of education, oftentimes an apprenticeship where you start working and you learn to be a carpenter under somebody. And then once you learn, you take tests and you get certain certifications. A lot of realistic jobs are on-the-job training where you get hired and somebody teaches you how to do it. Somebody teaches you how to put on a roof. Somebody teaches you how to clean something effectively, so on and so forth. A lot of realistic careers may require 2-year degrees, like the Helena College of Technology. The 8th graders that got to do that awesome field trip to Helena College learned about welding. They learned about carpentry. On the high school tour we did, when you think about the shops out there, those are all realistic skill type building activities. So let's look at some typical realistic careers. I mentioned earlier agriculture, being a rancher, being a farmer. You are having to, it's a dirty job. You have to work with animals and clean up after animals. In farming, it's hard work. You're out there on the fields. You're under the sun. You're exposed to the elements. Being a carpenter or a builder, somebody that builds things, builds houses for a living. Same as general contractor. General contractor is going to oversee a whole job. Being a roofer, I've done some roofing in the summer, even though it's opposite of my skill set, but I work for my brother as a roofer in the summer, and it is very hard work, but it is rewarding work when you can see your work coming together. Being a firefighter, being a truck driver, working in the concrete, working as a bricklayer. I mentioned earlier working as a welder. Helena High has some awesome welding 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can go on to Helena College or some other 2-year schools and get your 2-year welding, and there's some really awesome careers out there in the welding field where people come out making a lot of money and they get to weld metal and steel and produce some pretty cool stuffs. Being a janitor, being a park ranger, I mentioned that earlier. Being a plumber, an electrician, knowing how to work electrical work. You'll notice that a lot of these again are building or producing some sort of good or service, usually with your hands or using tools. Being an auto mechanic, being an oil field worker, or being a miner. And these are just a list that I came up with that came to my mind when I thought about typical realistic careers. So I want you to kind of look over that list and think, is that something that I could be interested in someday? Or conversely, you may be thinking, no way, no how. Those do not look like that's something I would want to do for 62,400 hours or more in my career. All right, the quote of the week is, choose a job that you love and you will never have to work a day in your life. And that's really the the direction I'm going in. I'm going to hit that home for Careers Month here in May, and it's so true. I don't feel like I come to work, but I don't really feel like I work. I do work, but I really enjoy it, and that's what this quote is really getting to. If you find something that you love, you don't feel like you're working. You feel like you're having a sense of purpose, that you're doing something that you really love. Brings us to this week's JellyBean Question of the Week winners, who are Abby Jaquez, Madison Sasser, Sophia Albrecht, Jordan Moldenauer, and Mr. Kepler. The answer was swims. This week's JellyBean Question of the Week is, if you have two coins which total 35 cents and one of the coins is not a dime, what are the two coins? If you think you know the answer, submit your answer to the Bob Box. Tune in next week, see if you are a winner. All right, Bobcats, let's go make it a great week.